Hi there, nurses, and welcome to Crazy Nurse RN channel. I'm Ducanes, a nurse educator. If you have any question or if you want to clarify some gray areas with regards to our topic today, please comment down below. I'll be glad to answer your questions and read your comments. Also, if you want to suggest any topic or content for our next videos, please also write them below. And if you find this YouTube channel useful, please click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to keep you updated for new video uploads. So in the past few days, I was thinking of what topics should I share to you, and I've come up to an idea to really share to you the concept on spirituality and spiritual care. So these concepts or these topics were studied in my master's thesis. So I was thinking to share with you my the result of my study in my master's thesis. But before that, let me first present to you the concept of spirituality and spiritual care. So issues on the provision of spiritual care. So millennial culture of young nurses. So nowadays, most of the hospitals or healthcare institutions are composed of young nurses who belong in millennial culture. These young nurses are task-oriented. That means they do not care much on the spiritual, psychological, and emotional aspect of nursing care. So that poses an issue on the provision of spiritual care. We also have pressures on work environment. So our world now is experiencing shortage of nurses. So that gives our nurses in the hospitals or in any healthcare institution increased workload, and that gives them pressures on their work environment. We also have lack of training and confidence. There are limited programs or initiatives regarding the provision of spiritual care, and this also decreases the confidence of some nurses in the provision of spiritual care. We also have feeling of indifference or apathy. So most of the nurses are not concerned about the provision of spiritual care. They don't care. Okay? And some of them are isolated. So that decreases the chance or that decreases the opportunity to give spiritual care to their patients. Also, we have the technological advancement in healthcare. Because of these advanced technologies that we have now in our healthcare institutions, in our hospitals, these decreased the interaction of nurses to their patients. And because of that decreased interaction to the patients, this also decreases the opportunity or the chance to give spiritual care to the patients. Okay? So these are the 5 major issues concerning on the provision of spiritual care. So I have here a quote from Anthony Douglas Williams. Spirituality does not come from religion. It comes from our soul. It is clear that when we say spirituality, it has nothing to do with our religion or our faith. It is a personal experience, a subjective aspect of our being. Also, we have here spirituality in healthcare. So it is an aspect that gives meaning and purpose to the person's life. Belief in a higher power that may inspire hope, seek resolution, and surpass physical and conscious constraints. So that is your spirituality in healthcare. It's more of finding the meaning and the purpose of someone's life or your life. Okay? And also, it can be said that it is a belief in a supreme being that gives hope, resolution, and free us from any physical and conscious barriers or constraints. What is spiritual care? So, a professional nurse attends to a person's spiritual or religious needs as he copes with illness, loss, grief, or pain. So, it can help him heal emotionally as well as physically. It rebuilds relationships and regain a sense of spiritual well-being. So this is your spiritual care. So initial steps in providing spiritual cares. So we have here assessment of spiritual needs, and after that utilization of spiritual resources. So in your assessment of spiritual needs, spiritual care or spiritual concerns usually relate to what we call the big questions of life. So your patient might question that why is he experiencing such dreadful experience or dreadful condition in the hospital, even though he did a lot of good deeds before. So that would warrant a nurse that this patient needs spiritual uh, intervention. Okay. After that, we will utilize our spiritual resources. So spiritual resources are practices, beliefs, objects, and or relationship that people often turn to for help in times of crisis or concerns. It could be a prayer booklet, okay? It could be a religious uh, material, okay? It could be prayers. It could be someone, okay? It could be think someone who thinks that his or her presence could alleviate the symptoms of the patient. Okay, so that could be considered as your spiritual resources. Spiritual care guiding principles. So care for all with respect for all religious and spiritual paths. Provide faith specific religious care and support. Facilitate for all religious belief of faith, and advise leadership to ensure the free exercise of religion. Okay, so remember, we have care, provide, facilitate, and advise. Let's now go to Millennial Spirituality. So a Millennial Spirituality is a Christocentric and steeped in the gospel values of charity, compassion, and servant leadership. Okay, so it is a Christ-centered spirituality. Okay, Millennial spirituality, however, less attached to organized religion than their parents or grandparents, believed in God, and identify with statements like, I feel a deep sense of spiritual peace and well-being, or I experience a deep sense of wonder about the universe. This is according to Pew Research Center 2019. Okay, so this is your millennial spirituality. Spiritual nursing care. So what is your spiritual nursing care? It is a professional responsibility and a vital aspect of nursing care. So this is according to Max Shelley and James Son 2011. Okay, so that means it's a professional responsibility and an important aspect of nursing care. Okay, so we're done with the concept and terms regarding your spirituality and spiritual care. Now, I'll be presenting to you my master's thesis. So it is titled Nurses' Lived Experiences on Spiritual Care. It is a phenomenological study. Phenomenological study is a qualitative study. Okay, it is a qualitative study. So this study was conducted at St. Paul's Hospital, Iloilo, with five nurses who participated in this research. And this is under Central Philippine University Master of Arts in Nursing program. Okay. So for the overview, this study aimed to explore the lived experiences of nurses on spiritual care. The participants were chosen purposively, and saturation principles were applied, in which five participants who were known to give spiritual care to patients were interviewed. Data were analyzed using the Colysis descriptive phenomenological strategy. In-depth interview was used to collect data. All interviews were audio taped and transcribed by the researcher. Ethical principles were maintained throughout the study. So the participants of the study were five staff nurses from St. Paul's Hospital, Iloilo, who were known in providing spiritual nursing care. So for the findings, five major themes emerged from the study describing the lived experiences of nurses on the spiritual care. These are: spiritual care is creating connection, healing outcomes of spiritual care deepens one's spirituality, diversity of giving spiritual care, and lastly, barriers to spiritual care. So I have here statements taken from the verbatim of the participants, which gave the study a strong support in terms of their lived experiences. So I have here a verbatim, so I would not read those narratives because this was written on a native language. So it is conducted in Iloilo City. So these verbatims or these transcripts were written in Hiligaynon. So the first statement here points out about extending oneself beyond nursing care. Next, we have making them feel of my presence and building relationship with God. Okay, so these three are considered the sub themes of the study, and it makes a one theme based on these three concepts. So it is the theme one of the study. Spiritual care is creating connection. Okay, that is a major theme. Spiritual care is creating connection. So under that, we have your extending oneself beyond nursing care, making them feel of my presence, and building relationship with God. Next, we have mental nourishment, physical wellness, boost one's spirituality. These three sub-themes direct the development of the second theme, which is healing outcome of spiritual care. Okay, so that is your second major theme. Also, we have here self-fulfillment, ability to care selflessly, and positive change. So that created your third theme, which is spiritual care deepens one's spirituality. Next, we have here sharing life experiences, drawing from learned concept on spiritual care, offering prayers. So give that gives you the fourth theme, which is diversity of giving spiritual care. We also have interpersonal barriers, personal barrier, and we have your work related barrier. So that made your fifth theme, which is barriers to spiritual care. Okay. So now I have here a diagram presenting to you the five major themes identified in the study. So first we have that spiritual care is creating connection. Spiritual care deepens one's spirituality. Healing outcomes of spiritual care, barriers to spiritual care, and diversity of spiritual care. These five major themes directed us to our essence of the phenomenon. So, our essence of the phenomenon was identified through analysis and synthesis of these themes, and it created spiritual care is caring holistically from the heart. So, it is drawn from the experiences of nurses on the provision of spiritual care. A nurse ministers spiritual care holistically to a patient with pure intention to care which comes solely from the heart. The intention of love is actualized through creating connection with the patient as they extend themselves beyond what is expected of them as nurses. The presence that they bring creates a sense of comfort and relief to their patients from physical, mental, and spiritual distresses. As nurses mediate spiritual care, they build truthful relationship with the patient, family, significant others, and God. The healing outcomes of spiritual care have been established as the nurse gives spiritual care to patient through promoting mental nourishment, improving physical wellness, and boosting one's spirituality. As they dwell with, their spirituality deepens, and the purpose of their being has been actualized as a nurse. They attain self fulfillment by enhancing their ability to care selflessly through touching the lives of every patient, which created a positive change completely. Even though nurses care holistically out of love, the diversity of giving spiritual care emerged as a nurse gives spiritual care to patients, sharing life experiences, drawing from learned concept on spiritual care, and offering prayers serve as the well of spiritual resources when it is filled with diverse ways of providing spiritual care. Although nurses strive to give care holistically, interpersonal, personal, and work related barriers surface along the way as the nurse fulfills his or her commitment of service. It cannot be avoided that at some point, barriers to spiritual care may arise. Okay, so this is the whole concept of the study, and this validates and proves the pre-existing culture of Polinian nurses, which is Ilonggo Polinian nurses brand of care. So the brand of care of Polinian nurses is holistic patient care. So I have made a graphical representation of the phenomenon identified in this study for better visualization and understanding of those who will be reading this output. So I have here a beautifully made representation, a graphical representation by a friend of mine. So, in totality, the lived experiences of nurses on the provision of spiritual care are well represented by a nurse who holds the heart steadily with two hands, which symbolizes love, passion, and connection to care for the patient holistically. The nurse's cup found above the heart depicts a nurse who ministers spiritual care as holistic care, seeing the entirety of the whole being. A cross is placed at the point where both hands meet, which represents nurse's spirituality, which secures a tie of pure intention to care for the whole being of a person. At the center of the heart, a patient is placed representing as the focus and recipient of holistic care rendered by a nurse with untainted intention to care from his or her heart. So, in relation to our five identified major themes, so it was identified that the cup represents the diversity of giving spiritual care because it represents the knowledge of the nurse regarding spiritual care. Next, we have your hands, which represents your creating connection. Next, we have the cross, which represents the deepens one's spirituality, and the heart represents the healing outcomes. Okay, healing outcomes of spiritual care, which means when a nurse gives or provides spiritual care to a patient, the healing outcomes are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual healing. Okay, although nurses strive to give spiritual care to patients, it cannot be avoided that at some point in their provision of spiritual care, they might experience or they might encounter barriers. Okay, so these are the concepts or the themes presented in the study. So, in totality, this directs us to a phenomenon: spiritual care is caring holistically from the heart. So, it proves and validates a pre existing culture of Polinian, which is Ilonggo Polinian nurses' brand of care. Okay, so for the recommendations of this study, so nurses must be consistent and responsible in attending and meeting the spiritual needs of the patient. The diverse ways and means of providing spiritual care by nurses would help patients address their spiritual needs and goals in the course of their treatment. Enhancement programs, training, and initiatives on the provision of spiritual care would be a great opportunity for nurses to address their spiritual care barriers, difficulties, and issues. Also, identifying, planning, implementing, and evaluating effective strategies, interventions, and programs training on the provision of spiritual care must be consistently implemented by hospital managers and administrators. Self-awareness workshops, activities, time management seminars, and formulation of spiritual care assessments or modular instructions would be a big help for managers and administrators to support their staff nurses' commitment to the value of spiritual care by means of periodic assessment on their professional integration of spiritual care as evaluated by them. Lastly, this study left us with many aspects of spiritual care that our researchers can explore, such as the experience of the patient and family after receiving spiritual care and the compliance among health team members in the provision of spiritual care. Future studies examining spiritual care experiences and the extent to which nurses share the same view across countries, other religious affiliation, and varied age group must be explored. So what is your takeaway with this presentation? So, spiritual care is a professional responsibility and a vital aspect of nursing care. So that means the importance and relevance of giving spiritual care is the same as giving medication, is the same as reviving the patient, is the same as attending to the physical and mental needs of our patient. So we do not need, so we are not exempted to not give spiritual care to our patient, because it is expected from us professionally to give spiritual care to our patient. Okay, so thank